Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story, one of the largest fentanyl precursor seizures in the U.S. to date. The chemicals discovered enough to kill millions of Americans. Prosecutors indicted a Chinese national for allegedly leading the operation.
They don't have a fentanyl problem in the country because all these factories that are producing these precursors know that if it ends up in China, they'll end up dead.
From internet censorship to mass surveillance through tech-related hardware, a House panel explores the Chinese Communist Party's efforts to retain and export control through cutting-edge technology. The U.S. Embassy in Beijing joins in on a message from Washington, urging the Chinese regime to cease its persecution against the spiritual discipline Falun Gong, which has been suppressed there for over 25 years. And Palestinian factions, including rivals Fatah and terrorist group Hamas, have agreed to form an interim national unity government. That's during a meeting brokered by the Chinese regime. One of the largest fentanyl seizures in the U.S. Over 4,000 pounds of fentanyl precursors, enough to kill millions of Americans. The Justice Department indicted a Chinese national Monday for allegedly importing those shipments into the U.S. Chinese national Mingsu Fang is under arrest in New York. The indictment said Fang allegedly imported those raw materials for fentanyl from China into the U.S. Those precursors were then sent to Mexico, where they would be pressed into pills and shipped back to the U.S. Fentanyl is the deadliest drug facing the U.S. It's highly addictive and 50 times more potent than heroin. Fentanyl has taken about 280,000 American lives since 2020, including the two sons of Michigan resident Rebecca Kaisling.
My two sons, Caleb, age 20, and Kyler, age 18, were killed by fentanyl that was in fake Percocets.
Her life scarred forever because of the drug.
It has been a living hell. People will tell me that I'm so brave because I testified and I've been doing some speaking, but most days it's really hard to get myself out of bed. And I have 3 daughters, but I feel like I'm dragging my own dead body around.
Back to the indictment over fentanyl precursor shipments. The DOJ said officials seized 100 such shipments between August and October 2023, and that they were able to slip into the U.S. without a detailed inspection because Fang and his team labeled the value of the packages as less than $800. U.S. Customs allow goods worth less than that amount to enter the U.S. duty-free. If convicted, Fang faces a maximum penalty of life in prison plus a $10 million fine. He's set to appear in court Tuesday. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Texas said drugs made by Fang's team could have found their way into Houston, but there's no way to know for sure. He's encouraging parents to talk to their children about the dangers of fentanyl. Hamdani said, quote, "You've got children who think they're taking Percocet, oxycodone, or Adderall. They have no idea that those pills are laced with fentanyl because a friend gave it to them. What ends up happening is those kids don't wake up the next day. Our plea to parents is that one pill shouldn't be a death sentence." With fentanyl pouring into the country, Republican Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance is pledging that a Trump-Vance administration would tackle the issue head-on by targeting China to stem the flow. To discuss what that China policy might look like, we sat down with retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General Robert Spalding, author of War Without Rules. General Spalding, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you back on the show.
Thanks. Great to be back.
We know from Unrestricted Warfare that was written by 2 Chinese colonels inside Communist China that Communist China sees drug warfare as a type of warfare. Now, we've also heard many people saying that Trump is a strong leader. So if he does end up back in the White House, how would a strong leader tackle this fentanyl issue coming from China?
The only way you tackle this is as a systemic problem driven by Chinese policies. And what do? They provide tax rebates to the chemical manufacturers that are manufacturing the precursors for fentanyl and then, enabling it to be shipped to the United States and other countries. And so the only way that I think you can really go after this is to go after not just the trade with China, but the trade with the U.S. allies, and basically begin to say, if we are going to cut off trade, not just between the U.S. and China, but we're going to cut it off between our allies in China if they don't stop the fentanyl trade, because they can stop it. They know they can stop it. They don't have a fentanyl problem in the country because all these factories that are producing these precursors know that if it ends up in China, they'll end up dead. And so recognizing the Chinese Communist Party controls China with the iron fist, nothing happens there without the party's approval, and therefore the party is approving of this and make it painful for the party. In other words, a complete economic blockade will get them to start to think about the implications of continuing this policy.
And former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley said in her speech that a strong president doesn't start wars, a strong president prevents wars. What would you most like to see in terms of China policy from a Trump-Vance administration?
More military is dangerous for all of us. And so, what the Chinese did very smartly when they saw the internet and globalization, they first focused on protecting the homeland. And I think, from our standpoint, we need to do that. We need to protect our homeland from infrastructure attacks. We need to protect it from propagandization from the United Front Work Group. When we start to look at that and then look at our allies and partners and require and request that they do the same if they want to trade with us and they continue to have access to our society. And I think starting from a position of defense, then we can start to think about, how do we want to go on the offense? And if you remember, back during the first Cold War, the offense was really about providing an opportunity for the Chinese people to see a different light when it comes to China. Bring back the U.S. Information Agency, use Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Europe, like we did in the past. Use other tools like social media to really balance the level of narrative, so now it's not so Communist Party focused. I was just talking to an executive the other day who recognized in their company that messages coming from the Chinese Communist Party were deliberately, skewing media with regard to the company. And they said, well, why is this? And I said, because the Chinese Communist Party sees a successful American corporation as an adversary and seeks to destroy it. And so we have to look at and understand unrestricted warfare as a comprehensive way of fighting a war that doesn't require weapons.
General Spalding, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Digital surveillance at home and abroad. A House panel Tuesday explores China's efforts to retain and export censorship through cutting-edge technologies. NTD's Sam Wong has more.
On Tuesday, the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party delved into China's surveillance and censorship in the digital age. Members of the committee said Beijing has made technology development a top priority. That's as the regime spends billions of dollars every year to establish a, quote, digital China.
Behind the Great Firewall, the CCP has the Chinese people trapped in a parallel reality where they are fed a steady stream of propaganda, tightly controlled by Xi's authoritarian regime. What the CCP fears most is the Chinese people learning the truth.
People living under the communist regime don't have access to American social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Instead, they're provided with domestic alternatives controlled by the party state. Those who seek access to uncensored information in China often use a virtual private network or VPN to bypass restrictions. But doing that is becoming more and more challenging as authorities ramp up regulations and even criminalize the use of circumvention tools in many instances.
Once you have hundreds of thousands or 10,000 people using it, then the Chinese police can find you. What Chinese government doing is to not only blocking those tools, but suppress the spreading of such technology.
Today, China's surveillance and censorship apparatus is among the world's most sophisticated, from cameras installed on every street corner to data harvesting via software and apps. According to lawmakers here in the U.S., this model is now expanding to countries like Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and Myanmar.
When dictators around the world know they can rely on the CCP to support them, when they're under U.S. sanctions, they are strengthened and enabled to commit more human rights abuses.
With China investing billions in its surveillance and control systems, experts say the U.S. must step up its efforts to counter threats from the Chinese Communist Party. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Sam Wong, NTD News.
More news from cyberspace. The Epoch Times has been targeted in another mass cyber attack. On July 20th, a coordinated denial of service attack used tens of thousands of computers to overwhelm media company servers. The company believes the DOS attack was linked to the Chinese Communist Party. The Epoch Times website have been consistently attacked since the company's founding in 2000, especially around so-called sensitive dates. The latest round of attacks started a few days earlier, but peaked on July 20th, a sensitive date for China's ruling regime. Every year on that day, the Epoch Times publishes news about the CCP's persecution against Falun Gong that began on July 20th, 1999. This April, a U.S. intelligence agency told the Epoch Times that it traced a similar cyber attack to the CCP. That attack occurred on April 25th. The same day that 10,000 Falun Gong practitioners staged a peaceful demonstration in China 25 years ago. As the Chinese regime's unprecedented persecution against faith group Falun Gong enters its 25th year, the U.S. Embassy in Beijing condemned the large-scale suppression across China. The embassy posted on its X account Tuesday. The post reads, "We solemnly mark 25 years today since the People's Republic of China, or PRC, began a campaign of repression against practitioners of Falun Gong." The post also includes a statement issued by the State Department on July 20th. It condemns Chinese authorities for violating human rights and abusing the faith group and their family members. The department said, quote, "We call upon the PRC to cease its repressive campaign and release all who have been imprisoned for their beliefs." It's worth noting that the House passed a bill called the Falun Gong Protection Act on June 25th that's now headed to the Senate for consideration. If passed, the law will allow the U.S. to take stronger and clearer measures to punish those involved in the persecution. Sirens rang out, roads were emptied, and people were ordered to stay indoors in Taiwan's capital city Tuesday.
It's the city's annual air raid exercise simulating a Chinese missile attack. The civil defense drill comes as Taiwan's yearly war games hit a hiccup.
The current weather conditions are not suitable for fighter jet drills. Therefore, the air defense drills are canceled today.
An intensifying typhoon is approaching eastern Taiwan. The military exercises are adjusting to ensure safety. The drills underscore Taiwan's commitment to preparedness. The Chinese Communist Party sees Taiwan as its own, despite never having ruled it. It has pledged to take the island by force if necessary. Beijing has ramped up military pressure on Taiwan in recent years, sending fighter jets near the island almost on a daily basis.
With the U.S. doubling down on support for Israel, the Chinese Communist Party is strengthening its ties with the Hamas terrorist group with a new deal. The U.S. State Department weighs in. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the details.
The CCP is using the Israel-Hamas war as leverage to gain influence in the Middle East. After 3 days of talks in Beijing, leaders of 14 different Palestinian factions on Tuesday signed an agreement. The deal, mediated by the Chinese regime, would give Hamas a role in an interim national reconciliation government.
We're signing an agreement for national unity to say that the way to continue this path is our national unity.
Israel dismisses the deal, saying their goal is to eradicate the Hamas terrorist group. The State Department had this to say.
When it comes to governance of Gaza at the end of the conflict, there can't be a role for a terrorist organization. Hamas has long been a terrorist organization. They have the blood of innocent civilians, both Israeli and Palestinian, on their hands.
This deal is the latest example of the CCP's longtime goal of strengthening relations with terrorist and insurgent groups in the Middle East. Here's what one Middle East expert previously told NTD.
China has been trying to establish over the last decade and change as a key trade and transit route for Chinese goods and influence through the Middle East and then up into Eastern Europe. And the Russians also want to have diplomatic relationships with these terrorist organizations, and indirectly align with the Chinese, who also would like to see reduced U.S. influence all over the world.
A similar meeting took place last year when Beijing hosted talks between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Coming up, a new strategy from the Pentagon to counter the Chinese regime and Russia as they shore up their own partnership in the Arctic region. Ecuador doubling down to deter illegal fishing activities, including from China.
The problem is that the large number of foreign fishing vessels reaches a point where they begin to plunder ecosystems. Several countries are involved since foreign flag fleets make long fishing trips across the Pacific Ocean, even reaching the Atlantic Ocean.
And the Philippines is signing defense pacts with 3 more countries. Manila just signed a defense deal with Japan military pact amid China's increasing aggression in the Indo-Pacific. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 3 years. If you'd like to support us, consider donating. Find us at donorbox.org/China-in-focus or subscribe to our partner platform Epoch TV, where you can watch our full episodes. Just click the link down below. Here's what to look out for in our second half. A new strategy from the Pentagon to counter the Chinese regime and Russia as they shore up their own partnership in the Arctic region. Ecuador doubling down to deter illegal fishing activities, including from China.
The problem is that the large number of foreign fishing vessels reaches a point where they begin to plunder ecosystems. Several countries are involved since foreign flag fleets make long fishing trips across the Pacific Ocean, even reaching the Atlantic Ocean.
And the Philippines is signing defense pacts with 3 more countries. Manila just signed a defense deal with Japan military pact amid China's increasing aggression in the Indo-Pacific. More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.